your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines in southern Alberta this past week. For the second time in 2 weeks, Alberta sheriffs have shut down a drug house here in Lethbridge. Over the past couple of years, the Safer Communities and Neighborhoods Unit, or SCAN, has received 13 complaints of drug activities against the owner at 4518 28th Avenue South. Lethbridge Police and RCMP searched the home back on June 6th and again on July 31st. They seized fentanyl, meth, stolen motorbikes, smoke grenades, and a loaded rifle. SCAN obtained a community safety order from the Court of King's Bench on August the 21st to close the property and end all tenancy and lease agreements on September the 4th. The property has since been boarded up.
This community is going to feel much more comfortable with their children walking past this house, going to school, which is directly across the houses behind me. So our hope is that the community safety is increased in this neighborhood, and people within this community feel a lot safer after this process. An investigation of this length and this complexity doesn't happen without the support and cooperation with Lethbridge Police Service, as well as the RCMP out of Coaldale in southern Alberta.
Back on August the 22nd, another Lethbridge drug house was ordered to be closed for similar reasons. Since SCAN was introduced in 2008, they have investigated more than 9,000 properties and issued 126 community safety orders. And it appears scammers are now using artificial intelligence in the grandparents scam. As BCN's Heidi Echeverria explains, Lethbridge police have now warned that this type of fraud is rising in our city.
Scammers don't just send messages pretending to be government officials. They also ask you to pay money. They pretending to be from a business, requesting additional information so that their supposed product or service can be delivered. But now there are also grandparent scammers who use artificial intelligence to target seniors. The CEO of Green Acres Foundation discusses what they do to prevent seniors from being affected.
At Green Acres, we try everything we can to try to educate as many seniors as we can. What we do here is we're very fortunate that we have a good relationship with the Lethbridge Police Service, and we have them in our sites giving education programs to our seniors. As well, we have posters up, and we give education in the resident newsletters. And just by actually talking, we have our site managers trying to explain to as many residents as possible the dangers, especially now with so many AI scams. So it's a constant education. But I tell you, one of the best ways that we can educate the residents is by having the residents talk about it.
For his part, Kevin Talbot, sergeant with the Economic Crime Unit at Lethbridge Police Service, explains how scammers are using AI and how it works.
What they'll do is they will do some research online through social media, web pages, and things of that nature, and they'll obtain an audio recording of an individual that could possibly have a grandparent. And then what they'll do is they'll mimic that individual, and then they'll research who their grandparent is, and then they'll contact them, and they'll have a conversation with them, but it'll sound just like their granddaughter or grandson. Never assume that someone that's calling you is actually who they say they are. So the very first thing you should do is your own research and make sure that that's actually your grandson or granddaughter or someone that's representing them. And the way you do that is contact someone who's close to them as well, like a parent or a close friend or another relative of that nature, or call them directly and find out if they actually are in trouble and if they need your help, and then go from there.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
The city of Lethbridge is reminding residents to be cautious around Henderson Lake in the last days of summer, as the cyanobacteria advisory remains in place. Cyanobacteria, more commonly known as blue-green algae, appears as fuzz or globs in the water and gives off a musty or grassy smell. Algae blooms typically form in hot and calm weather. Contact in water with cyanobacteria can often lead to symptoms ranging from rash and irritation, fever, nausea, and can be fatal to pets. The city treats the lake monthly with beneficial bacteria, but there are no direct treatments to stop or control algae blooms. Residents and visitors are advised to avoid all contact with affected waters and to avoid fishing in the area. Up next, stories from around Alberta, including a new deal that was finalized between the province, Legal Aid Alberta, and the Law Society of Alberta. The Alberta government, Legal Aid Alberta, and the Law Society of Alberta have finalized a new long-term agreement. The new 5-year deal came into effect on September the 6th and will continue until September 5th of 2029. The agreement's signing means that Alberta's legal aid system will remain stable and will continue to meet the needs of those who need legal assistance. In a statement, Legal Aid Board Chair Ryan Caliu says access to justice is a fundamental right for all Albertans. Key to this is an independent legal aid system, and this agreement specifically codifies these values. Strengthening legal aid will include ongoing conversations that involve the parties to this agreement with a commitment to supporting the legal needs of Albertans. The Insurance Bureau of Canada says this year's Jasper wildfire and hailstorm which hit Calgary are among the weather events responsible for a record amount of claims. The Bureau says the industry is looking at around 228,000 claims. That is a 406% increase compared with the 20-year average. Two other events that have driven claims this year include flooding in Ontario and Quebec. In celebration of Alberta Culture Days this month, the province has given out $375,000 in grants to support 111 organizations in 48 communities. Government officials say the funding will help towns and cities around the province celebrate a wide range of cultures through art and storytelling. Last year, 215,000 Albertans attended Alberta Culture Days events. Officials say more than 59 communities hosted events to increase awareness and engagement in the arts and cultural life of their communities. Officials also say to mark this month, Albertans will have free access to provincially owned museums, historic sites, and archives on the weekend of September 28th and 29th. And Alberta's Arts, Culture, and Status of Women Minister Tanya Furr announced that the province will be helping more women break through barriers and gain employment through 3 unique scholarship opportunities.
Careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, also known as STEM, as well as cultural industries, are integral to our province. STEM-focused careers are in industries that push innovation, our economy, and our society forward. Alberta's cultural industries, such as film, television, music, books, and magazines, allow us to share our province's unique culture, perspectives, and stories on stages everywhere. As opportunities in these industries continue to grow, Alberta's government is ensuring students have a chance to have fulfilling careers in these sectors. As the school year starts again, I'm proud to share 3 scholarship opportunities Alberta's government offers to support post-secondary students entering these and other sectors. This includes the Women in STEM Scholarship, the Person's Case Scholarship, and a new scholarship we are announcing for the first time today, the Women in Technical and Applied Arts Scholarship.
The Alberta government says students going back to school will have more choices to explore career education in communities across the province. Officials say 7 new collegiate school programs will begin this year to enhance career education opportunities. The new collegiates will offer students programming in areas such as science, aviation, technology, engineering, business, and agriculture.
It's important to me that we continue to enhance career education. This is a priority of the Government of Alberta so that we can make sure our students have every opportunity that they need to pursue their passions and succeed in our dynamic, fast-paced, and competitive job market. Whether it's through the opening of new collegiate schools or the expansion of other education pathways, we're working together with schools, communities, post-secondary partners, and industry to make sure that we're able to offer a wide range of exciting and rewarding learning opportunities for students. While collegiates are just one part of the career education equation that already exists in our education system, the collegiate model does indeed create new opportunities for students to pursue more specialized and focused programming alongside their regular courses.
Many questions remain over new sex education rules the provincial government has promised. That is according to Jason Schilling, president of the Alberta Teachers Association. Schilling says he does not understand what was wrong with the old system and that students now risk missing out on valuable information. The province has said it is moving ahead with legislation that would require parents to proactively opt in rather than opt out of lessons in sexual health. Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides says legislation is to be proposed on the subject in the fall. Coming up after the break, we have more news from Alberta, including an update from the City of Calgary on their water main crisis that began over the summer. That's coming up next. Calgary city officials say Calgarians are using more water than the city can handle while a major pipe undergoes a second round of repairs. City officials say usage on Tuesday was 506 million liters. That is well above the 485 million liters officials say the city can manage without risking damage to pumps and other issues. Since the repairs began, 11 tickets carrying $3,000 fines have been dished out to businesses and homeowners. With our hot temperatures, it is no surprise that people are being terrorized by an increasing number of wasps. But the extent of that increase this year is causing many to be quite concerned. This is due in part to a wet spring followed by a consistently hot and dry summer. Officials say wildfire smoke from BC has also pushed the wasp populations away from the forests and into large urban centers in Alberta. An expert from the University of Alberta provides tips on what can be done to limit wasp populations at your home or business.
The do-it-yourself traps can be like a pop bottle with filled with some sugary solution, or even like a yellow bowl. That will give them a visual attractant as well as an olfactory attractant. And then the wasps hit that fluid, they're attracted to the sweetness of the fluid, they hit the fluid, and then they drown inside the trap in the fluid. So those should be placed away from your eating area. So don't like hang it by your barbecue. You want to hang it away from where you're most wanting to be outside, so that the wasps are attracted away from your living space.
Ron Buckshot Barge hosted a very popular children's show in Calgary for 3 decades, making it one of the longest-running kids programs in Canadian history. His family recently shared memories of growing up with their father, whom they say had a knack for people. Ron Barge sadly passed away last month at the age of 87.
I was 2 when he started March 13th, 67. He started Buckshot, so.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, bird the hat. And a bear. And a bear.
Dad's trick was never to talk down to people, right? He just talked to you. Even if you were a puppet, you got talked to.
Yeah.
So that was, if you're talking about different types of learnings, that's a great learning to have. Because when you talk to somebody, they learn. If you talk down to somebody, it's like, yeah. So,
no condescending.
Never.
And that's why kids were, like even my children, so his grandsons and his great grandsons, he always talked to them like they're people. And so kids were just drawn to him. And no matter even if they weren't his grandsons, they could be whoever. The children were just drawn to him. They just were. My first memory of Dad that he was like famous, I guess you could say, here in Calgary would be we went to Chinook Center, and this was back in the Woodward's day, so a long time ago. His voice was very recognizable. He was too, but his voice was really distinctive. And so yeah, all of a sudden we have like 20 people surrounding us, asking for autographs and stuff. And I can remember just looking at my mom and going, well, he's just my dad. Why are all these people standing around him? Because just didn't make sense to me. The Buckshot thing was his job, and we ran home from school to watch it too.
Calgary Flames fans stopped by the Saddle Dome in Calgary over last weekend to pay their respects to former Flame Johnny Gaudreau. They brought baubles of purple Gatorade, flowers, handwritten notes, jerseys, and even bags of Skittles. Gaudreau and his brother Matthew were tragically killed by a suspected drunk driver while cycling near their childhood home in New Jersey.
Johnny actually was the reason why I became a Flames fan, and it was like, just to hear that news this morning has just been devastating. It wasn't just about him on the ice, it was what he did for our community. Like he was so giving of his time. I mean, of course he is a great hockey player, but just what he gave back to the community, to the kids, and to the community at large that's what really brought me to him. Like, he's a really great Calgarian.
The impact on the team and the sports and the hockey, it's so much, and we could talk about that for days and about the impact he had on the ice, but it's really the impact off the ice, I think, that was really huge to what he was. He loved this community, he loved his family, and it's been it's been a hard day just having to deal with a lot of these raw feelings. I know a lot of Flames fans held this family and this player close to their hearts. At the end of the day, it's a father, it's a brother, and Matthew as well. We're just devastated to hear about this news.
After the break, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was in Texas during the Labor Day weekend, but it was not for a last-minute holiday. The details of that trip are coming up after this break. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was in Texas during the Labor Day weekend, meeting with Governor Greg Abbott. The two were joined by Alberta's trade representatives to the U.S., along with officials from Texas. To chat about this visit in more detail is BCN's Hal Roberts, who sat down with our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joined us from Edmonton.
Tyler, I'm guessing the two groups met to discuss some energy policies?
They sure did. Yeah, they were talking energy policy, Texas, sort of being one of the other major oil and gas producing jurisdictions on the continent. And they talked about some sort of more governance stuff, you might say, like in terms of wildfire management, red tape reduction, some, I guess you might call conservative priorities that sort of, cross jurisdictional borders and barriers. And Premier Smith said in her sort of tweet explaining what she was doing down there, she said they also had an argument about whether Alberta beef or Texas beef is the superior meat. The Premier, of course, defending the honor of Alberta's ranchers, and Governor Abbott defending the honor of Texas beef producers. So, I guess there's always a little bit of time for fun on the side of these tete meetings that politicians tend to have. It's not a lot concrete seems to have come out of this, but then again, it's sort of what concrete might come out of it. But these are sort of relationship building meetings and sharing best practices from jurisdictions that have similar outlooks and goals and things like that. So not an unusual trip in any particular way, but certainly interesting nonetheless.
Gotta say, I'm a big fan of Alberta beef myself. Tyler, Alberta oil production keeps breaking records here, and according to ATB Financial in July, the oil and gas sector produced about 4 million barrels each and every day, breaking previous records and the 9th consecutive July of growth. But, we still have a provincial fuel tax of 13 cents a litre. How does that make any sense?
Well, that has to do with the cost of, or the amount of money that oil producers are getting per barrel of oil. So yeah, production is way up, as you said, sort of breaking records, 9th consecutive year of growth. But that doesn't mean that the price per barrel is all that high. Now, it's not as bad as the government had feared. I believe when they did their budget projections back in January, they're sort of hedging and thinking about $70, $75 a barrel. And I think it's averaged closer to 80 over the last several months. But the way the fuel tax things work is it comes off in portions. So it's a 13-cent tax. I think if it gets over $90 a barrel, the tax comes off by 5 or 6 cents, and then it vanishes basically, I think, at $100 a barrel. So we're still sort of below that threshold, even though it's certainly not nearly as bad as it was, say, back in 2019, when if I recall correctly, I think barrels were selling at like negative prices, which was a fiscal disaster for the Alberta government. But not perhaps as high as the government would want in terms of bringing money into its treasury and certainly not high enough, I guess, to have a reduction in the fuel tax. So that's, I guess, the explanation there. And I mean, the other thing that is always interesting when you look at oil prices and barrels per day and things like that is, to what extent are other sectors of the economy feeling the benefits of that?
And Tyler, Finance Minister Nate Horner offered up a fiscal update for our province. Alberta is now forecasting a $2.9 billion surplus, which is a lot more than the $367 million surplus that was originally forecasted.
Yeah, so that's good news. About $2.5 billion of that $2.9 billion is actually because of resource revenues being higher than they had originally projected. So that $80 a barrel number is a good thing in some ways, but you can imagine what it might be if it was $95 a barrel or something like that. Now, the thing that is a bit confusing about this is that this is a paper surplus, is what they're calling it. So what this basically means is that there is this money coming in, this surplus money that is going to be there, but it's not like accessible money. It's interest on the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, it's tuition fees going towards things, sort of stuff like that, and obviously the oil revenues as well. But the government is actually still borrowing. They're still borrowing about $600 million this year for sort of short and medium term operational costs. So it is admittedly really confusing. And I mean, I'm no economist, so I don't totally understand how it works, but the reality is that surplus exists, but it's not really money that we can use to spend on hospitals or teachers or something like that, which, is basically the case the NDP is making. They're saying, well, look, if the surplus keeps growing and this money isn't being spent on services for Albertans, well, how good of fiscal management is really being done by the provincial government here? So, certainly not that a good opposition lets any government announcement go by unchallenged, but certainly a little bit of stink being made by the NDP over this last week.
A bit of good news coming up after the break. Alberta has seen a drop in opioid-related deaths, and the race for the open seat in the Lethbridge West riding heats up. There's some controversy involving hospital management. There is apparently going to be a shift from AHS to Covenant Health, the Catholic healthcare provider. According to Tyler Dawson, the noise stems from what healthcare services Covenant offers compared to AHS. Take a look.
So the gist of it is this. Premier Danielle Smith has been doing this sort of tour of the province, holding town hall meetings with UCP party loyalists, which is fine and good. But the interesting thing is that she keeps sort of making policy announcements at these sort of events. And one of the things that she's mused about is sort of trying to introduce some sort of competition into the healthcare system. And the idea is that if Alberta Health Services operates a hospital somewhere, if wait times are too long, if they're not meeting whatever metrics the government sets, well, the government could say, well, sorry, guys, Covenant Health is actually going to step in and run this, and maybe they can do a better job. So you basically have a duopoly in Alberta. You have Covenant Health and you have Alberta Health Services running hospitals. And the idea is basically to have some sort of competition. And the Premier said, well, look, Covenant Health has actually never closed a rural healthcare facility, so perhaps they do it better than Alberta Health Services does. Some critics have pointed out, well, just because they haven't closed any of the facilities they operate doesn't mean they would have any better luck in some of the more challenging parts of the province. So that's been controversial as just an idea in itself. What sort of costs would this be to shift over if that comes up? Would doctors working in those facilities want to continue working for Covenant Health? There's all sorts of other questions here. And you did mention the healthcare procedure thing as well. Obviously, Covenant Health follows Catholic doctrine on medical procedures to some extent. They're, obviously they still provide, say, birth control would be a good example. But they don't, for example, perform assisted suicide in Covenant Health facilities. So there's a little bit of difference basically between what Covenant Health might do and what Alberta Health Services might do. And that's certainly raised some concerns among some parts of the population who are concerned about women's health in particular. So as with anything with the healthcare system, it's never not going to be controversial. And this is sort of one of those proposals that people have latched onto. It is still summer, so anything for a headline really. But some interesting stuff in the works, it seems, on healthcare in the province.
And still on the topic of healthcare, our province, Tyler, has seen a drop in opioid-related deaths. Sadly, I mean, 72 people still died of an opioid overdose back in May. But that, however, is the lowest number since the COVID-19 pandemic and a 55% decrease from May of last year.
Yeah, some really encouraging numbers, actually. Still tragic, as you say, but trending in a positive direction. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think in sort of the first 4 or 5 months of 2023, there was something like 700 opioid deaths. And in 2024, it's been more like 350 or 400. So a quite substantial reduction in the number of tragic opioid overdose deaths. Now, part of the question here, as is always the case in these things, is what is responsible for this trend? You know, is it government policy? Is it just simply changes in the composition of the illegal drug market, things like that? And it's probably a sort of a multifactorial explanation. There do seem to be more people who are on opioid agonist treatment, which is sort of your Suboxone sort of treatments that people can go on, different than, you know, a safe supply, but sort of another harm reduction technique, let's say. And there does seem to have been a reduction in carfentanil, the sort of super powerful synthetic opioid that was responsible for a lot of the opioid deaths in the last couple of years. So trending in a positive direction. Obviously, these are May numbers. We don't know what June, July, August look like yet. There's a lag in this reporting. So we will see if that trend is sustained in the next couple months when new numbers are revealed.
Tyler, we have a couple of nomination races going on here in Lethbridge and the Lethbridge West constituency. The three nominees hoping to become the candidate for the UCP are Erin Leclerc. She used to run the constituency office for MLA and current Minister Nathan Neudorf, Lethbridge City Councillor John Middleton Hope, and Shauna Grunninger, who's a real estate agent. When will the constituency vote actually be taking place?
Yeah, it'll be about a few weeks from now. September 23rd is the day that the UCP Constituency Association will make their pick. And it's actually later this week that the NDP will make the choice. On September 7th, the New Democrats down there will choose between Rob Miyashiro and Bridget Mearns. So we will have, you know, one party's person in the next few days here, and the other party will follow suit shortly. What we don't have yet is a date. We don't have a date for the by-election. Premier Danielle Smith has not called that yet. I believe it needs to be within 6 months of the resignation. And if I recall correctly, Shannon Phillips resigned July 1st. So could be, well, it'll have to be before Christmas, I think. But certainly sometime in this fall is when I would expect that to happen.
Many dream of living a life of relaxation as they reach their golden years and settle into retirement. The reality for many seniors, however, is that they are often feelings of isolation and loneliness. More on that after this break.